And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts 1,000 years, which was a big deal.
A discovery that could upend everything we thought we knew about early Christianity takes us far from Rome and Europe, deep into the highlands of Africa. For centuries, the Western world has told a simple story. Jesus was crucified, rose from the dead, appeared briefly to his followers, and then ascended to heaven. But hidden in the mountains of Ethiopia lies an entirely different account. Ancient texts preserved for over 2 millennia by devoted monks, claiming to record what Jesus truly said during the 40 days after his resurrection. These are not marginal footnotes or symbolic interpretations. They are full-length writings filled with prophecies, sacred teachings, and warnings that Roman authorities deemed too dangerous to survive. These writings reveal a side of Jesus that never made it into the standardized Bible, a teacher who spoke not in parables, but in direct, transformative truths about life, death, and the human soul. While most Christians today rely on a Bible containing 66 books, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has preserved a broader canon of 81 sacred texts. Written in Ge'ez, one of humanity's oldest languages, these manuscripts were carefully copied by hand over centuries. Each letter, each word was meticulously protected in monasteries perched high in the mountains. To the monks who safeguarded these texts, the words within were the direct voice of Christ. Among these hidden treasures is a document called the Book of the Covenant. Ethiopian tradition holds that it contains the actual teachings Jesus shared with his disciples after conquering death, instructions that go far beyond ritual, doctrine, or religious hierarchy. These were direct lessons meant to prepare followers for a mission that would outlast empires, transcending politics and institutions. In 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea, convened by Roman Emperor Constantine, decided which texts would form the official Christian Bible. The outcome was political as much as spiritual. Books that supported centralized authority, uniform doctrine, and controllable narratives were included. Those emphasizing personal mystical experience, visions, spiritual warfare, or direct connection with God were rejected. Ethiopia, geographically isolated and politically independent, never participated in this council and therefore retained what Rome sought to erase. Ethiopian tradition asserts that Jesus did not simply appear and vanish after his resurrection. For 40 days, he moved freely between the physical and spiritual realms, teaching his disciples in ways that challenged conventional ideas of salvation and divine presence. Death, he reportedly taught, is not humanity's true enemy. Spiritual blindness is. Understanding life as a continuous awakening transforms the very meaning of salvation.
A central teaching preserved in these texts radically differs from the message popularized by Rome. God's temple is not built from stone or gold. It is built within every human heart. Acts of love and kindness are living prayers. Compassion is a sanctified practice. Such a message undermines hierarchical control because it cannot be taxed, regulated, or confined to institutions. In Ethiopia, this vision survived intact, preserved in a tradition committed to the inner sanctity of every person. The Ethiopian scriptures also include warnings and prophecies. Jesus is said to have predicted that in the future, people would invoke his name while their hearts remained empty, that churches would rise like towers while forgetting the simplicity of love, and that leaders cloaked in purity would exploit the vulnerable. These warnings resonate strikingly with the modern world, where scandals, wars, and inequality have often been justified in the name of religion. The texts emphasize silent faith and humble devotion over public displays. True blessings, these writings suggest, belong to those whose service is unseen, whose faith requires no audience. They depict a Christ who walks with the marginalized, who nurtures the quiet, persistent believers overlooked by society. This portrayal completely reimagines the spiritual hierarchy established by organized religion. One of the most profound teachings preserved is the call to let one's actions become living prayers. Faith is not measured by ritual, ceremony, or memorized doctrine. It is reflected in the transformation of every breath, every choice, every encounter into an act of love. This is a Jesus who teaches from the wilderness rather than a throne, whose authority comes not from a church, but from the human heart itself. According to Ethiopian tradition, Jesus spoke of a coming fire that would not destroy the earth, but burn away human pride, greed, and illusion. He referred to himself as both the seed and the sword, signaling a force that awakens those still asleep in spiritual darkness. This fire represents the inner spark of awakening, a purification of consciousness that strips away falsehoods, masks, and the idols people create. In a world dominated by materialism, addiction, and spiritual emptiness, this prophecy reads like a manual for awakening, not destruction. Ethiopia's history explains why these teachings survived. The nation adopted Christianity in the 4th century, long before it became the state religion of Rome. Unconquered by European colonizers, Ethiopia developed its faith independently, guided by monks and mystics rather than councils and emperors. While Western Christianity became intertwined with empire, conquest, and hierarchy, Ethiopian Christianity remained untamed, profoundly spiritual, and unbound by political authority.
Another hidden text, known as the Gospel of Peace, offers a radically different account of Jesus' life. Contrary to the widely accepted narrative of crucifixion and martyrdom, Ethiopian tradition asserts that Jesus withdrew to the wilderness, continuing to teach about healing, spiritual purity, and living in harmony with creation. He spoke with the angels of air and water, emphasizing the sacredness of the natural world. Over time, these teachings were misinterpreted or rewritten to fit cultural, political, and religious agendas, giving rise to the story of the crucifixion that reinforced obedience, suffering, and institutional authority. The Ethiopian Jesus does not demand worship, he invites transformation. The measure of faith is not believing the right words, but embodying the right qualities, compassion, honesty, and interconnectedness with humanity in the natural world. In these texts, spiritual freedom replaces martyrdom and personal awakening takes precedence over submission to hierarchies. Ethiopia's position in history made it a guardian of these sacred texts. While much of Africa fell to European colonization, Ethiopia's independence allowed it to preserve its religious and cultural heritage. By the 4th century, Christianity was already flourishing there, and by the 6th century, Ethiopia served as a sanctuary for persecuted believers fleeing Roman oppression. These texts, untouched by Western standardization, include the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Discalia, among others, all reinforcing mystical, spiritual, and practical teachings that emphasize personal connection with God over institutional control. Monks dedicated centuries to copying these texts by hand, fasting and praying over every letter to ensure the teachings endured. Their devotion ensured that even as Rome narrowed its canon to 66 books, the Ethiopian Church preserved 88, retaining the diversity and richness of early Christian thought. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition presents a Christianity radically different from what the Western world inherited from Rome. It emphasizes love over obedience, inner transformation over ritual, and spiritual awakening over institutional validation. Its Jesus is alive, teaching that the kingdom of God is within every heart, that real faith is expressed through acts of kindness, and that spiritual truth is often found in the margins, in those overlooked by society, in deserts, mountains, and humble homes.
In the Ethiopian texts, the voice of Christ never fades. It survives in monasteries carved into cliffs, in languages largely forgotten by the outside world, and in practices of devotion that have persisted for centuries. These writings challenge conventional history, inviting us to consider that the true essence of Jesus' message may have little to do with power, wealth, or institutionalized religion, and everything to do with awakening the human spirit. The texts conclude with a promise: Christ is the seed and the sword, and his spirit will return. But this return, Ethiopian tradition suggests, is not about spectacular celestial events. It is about humanity finally recognizing the divine truth within. The teachings await those ready to listen, to awaken, and to embody love, compassion, and inner light.
Whether these texts are literal accounts or symbolic reflections of early Christian thought, they represent a profound alternative to the narrative that dominates the modern world. They remind us that Christianity did not begin and end with Rome, and that the true message of Jesus may have survived in places the world overlooked, preserved by faith, devotion, and a refusal to bow to empire. For 2,000 years, these teachings have waited in silence, ready for those willing to seek a spirituality grounded in the heart rather than the pulpit, in transformation rather than ritual, and in awakening rather than control. Ethiopia's hidden scriptures challenge us to reconsider everything we think we know about the life of Jesus, the nature of faith, and the destiny of the human soul. Perhaps now is the moment to listen. Perhaps the fire that has been waiting all along is finally ready to illuminate a world in need of its light.